Okay, we are now reconvened in open session. We will now consider action items from closed session. We'll start with Mr. Rice.
Madam President, I move that the Board of Trustees, without adopting the hearing officer's reasoning, accept the hearing officer's recommendation concerning the Level 3 employee grievance appeal of Capretta Taylor.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. George. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Mrs. James.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to terminate Shamikia Doyle's term employment contract for good cause and to authorize the superintendent or his designee to notify Ms. Doyle of this action in accordance with applicable law and policy.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes, ma'am. I move the board terminate the probationary contract of teacher Troy Jones at the end of its term in the best interest of the district, subject to any decision of the subcommittee to terminate the contract sooner for good cause, and further that the board authorize the superintendent or his designee to notify the teacher of the board's action.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rosenthal and a second by Mrs. James. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have the board members' reports. Ms. Helliger, you have our activity report.
All right. Board meeting date, February 13, 2017. This is our activities for the month of, February. Presentation to AVID classes at Richburn High School, Fort Bend Cares event, trip to Austin with Student Leadership 101 and 102, Fort Bend Chamber Education Division luncheon with John Tanner on A through F rating system in Texas, Shift Elementary School 100-day celebration, high school basketball games, One Voice for Texas Public Ed meetings, Girlfriends Giggle event, Boots and Badges event, Chinese Baptist Church Chinese New Year dinner, Vision and Planning Committee, Fort Bend Chamber Chairman's Gala, NSBA Advocacy Institute, Fort Bend ISD Secondary Science Fair Awards Night, National Science Day, Baines Middle School Career Day.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger.
Welcome.
And now moving on to special reports. Mrs. James.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan. Mr. Rice and I had the opportunity to attend the NSBA Advocacy Institute in Washington, D.C., January 29th through the 31st. And while we were there, we heard presentations from Congressperson Virginia Fox, who's the chairman of the House Education Committee, and Senator Lamar Alexander, who's the chairman of the Senate Education Committee. And we called upon our Texas delegation, including Senator John Cornyn, Senator Ted Cruz, Congressman Pete Olson, and Congressman Al Green. We advocated on behalf of public education, requesting more flexibility with regard to the Child Nutrition Act, and for Congress to fully fund the IDEA Act of 1975. The IDEA Act was passed in 1975, at which time Congress agreed to fund it at 40% of the total cost. And this they have consistently failed to do, and in fact are funding it at only 16% of the cost. We did ask our senators we did ask our U.S. senators to work closely with the new Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, in order to catch her up on this federal law before her next press conference. And that's a true fact. We did ask her to work on that and a few other things to help her get up to speed on public education in the United States. The conference was very well attended with over 800 school board trustees from around the country attending. The Texas delegation was the second largest there, and Mr. Rice and I were pleased to represent our school district.
Thank you, Mrs. James and Mr. Rice. You can't say your board members don't advocate for children in public education. I will tell you. Thank you for that report. Thank you, Mr. Rice and Mrs. James, for making the trip and for standing up for all kids in public education. And as a parent of a child who receives services under IDEA, I especially appreciate you advocating for my child and the others like her and for not mincing words. Thank you for that. Okay, do we have any other special reports?
Yes, Madam President. So the first Thursday of the month, I meet with the weekly construction meeting. This past Thursday, I guess it was, or is it 2 Thursdays ago now? Oscar Perez, Rona Hollyhead, Charles Dupree, and Steve Bassett. We had a great meeting, and I wanted to bring up a few facts about our bond program. And we are now reaching the peak of our construction. And I just have 3 simple facts here that I was able to get. Currently, we are managing work on 60 campuses simultaneously across the district. We are managing 190 contracts simultaneously. And we are placing $1.3 million of construction in the ground per day. So just to give you the scope of how big our bond program is. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. Thank you for bringing us up to speed and for attending those meetings on behalf of the board. Mr. Rice, did you have anything?
Way to go, Mr. Perez.
Thank you very much. Any other special reports? Okay, we will move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything to remove from the consent agenda?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Well, I don't need to remove it. I'd just like to discuss it, but
Okay, well then why don't we take a motion and then we'll have discussion if it doesn't need to be removed.
sure. 11C.
Okay. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. George. Do we have discussion? Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes. I wanted to just see if we can just get a very brief explanation of the refunding item that we're talking about here.
I'll take a stab at that, and then our
Okay.
experts can chime in.
You probably all talked about it last week, but I had to leave early, so.
No, it's okay, sir. So what we're refunding is the commercial paper. The commercial paper that's outstanding now. We have over 60 million outstanding now. By the time this date comes up, we'll have between the 90 million and 100, and so that needs to be taken out into a fixed and fix that out, and then we'll start rolling that again. You did also miss it whenever what we've already saved or what we will save through the current maturity of the paper outstanding is $1.3 million with this vehicle. So we were really happy about that.
By not fixing it earlier.
Exactly.
Right.
By not issuing $100 million in November.
Been fixed, right.
Right.
Okay.
And so the orders are mutually exclusive. And so what we're trying to do is make sure we have the maximum amount of flexibility with being either fixed or variable, depending on what the market is. Right now, we think we'll be fixing this out. And then also we're looking at the potential of a taxable issue for the new money for the CTE Center because of some of the enterprise functions that we have to do or that we want to do, and the private use regulations prohibit us from using tax-exempt debt for that. And so that angle is also in those documents. And so we're bringing 3 orders, and so there's not overlap between them, but it gives us the maximum amount of flexibility at a time when we really want a lot of flexibility given the given how volatile the market is.
So when you refund these things, what kind of rate do you think you're going to end up fixing it at?
Well, I mean, it's certainly, I mean, we hope it's as favorable as we can, and I think the earlier we go, the better. I mean, the market's waiting to see what happens with the tax proposals being discussed in Washington. But really, anything could happen with the market. You know, something could happen in Europe, something could happen elsewhere. And so, I mean, we've been modeling total interest costs in the low 3% range. So, you know, we'll just have to see.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal and Mr. Bassett. Do we have additional discussion? Mrs. James.
I have one other question, and it has to do with item 11E3, which is the revised interlocal agreement for the truancy program, or the Saved by the Bell. And was it my understanding that there were some, I don't know if they were called caseworkers or something like that, that were supposed to be paid for under this agreement? And then I was wondering, since we're kind of starting over, there's been a gap, how is that working? How are we handling those caseworkers? Are they our employees or employees of the county? And what, because we had some financial responsibility for those, and can someone remind us, please? Or explain the new situation, because I think it's new because of this agreement.
Yes, as far as the caseworkers themselves, those are still funded at $240,000 of their salaries are funded by the county. So that is part of their contribution. And we use them as case managers who go out mainly to homes and trying to intervene with families and kids. So that part of the agreement was not a part that changed.
Okay, so even though it says this agreement is starting now in December, the period where there was no agreement is not relevant to the.
That is correct. There were some changes to the agreement, but the caseworkers kept working with our students every day. That
Okay,
did
I
not
just
stop.
want to be sure they're compensated for that and they're
Yes,
not finding themselves high and dry.
yes, they were.
Thank you, Dr. Whitbeck. Any other discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Moving on to action items, 12A, this is approval of an electric easement with CenterPoint Energy to install a guy wire at Austin High School. May I have a motion?
Madam President, move to approve the recommended action.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. James. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Are we missing someone? It is. It is. Yeah. Motion passes. Okay, item 13, review future board meeting agenda items. Dr. Dupree.
All right. You can read the document, so I won't belabor it, but I will discuss the philosophy that went into developing this time. The president of Tassan and I last week had a very good meeting on Tuesday following our very long and late meeting on Monday night.
A very direct meeting.
We've kind of revisited from both perspectives. We discussed the philosophy of our meetings, and we're really going to strive on the workshop agendas to limit it to review when at all possible, but to have perhaps maybe one solid report on an agenda if the review is not too lengthy. But we really want to get back to managing the board's time so we're not having 4, 5, and 6 hour board meetings. And then on the regular meeting, once we've done the review, we'll have 1 or 2 information item updates. So we'll be managing that very tightly, so let us know, and we'll do our best as well to really get back to the 10 to 12 slides, 15 minutes max on the reports. So I think we're in a good place, but what it means is everything we've had slated to kind of to provide you in the next couple of months has now been spread out really through August into September. So we think it still honors the integrity of the board's desire to hear about student data on a regular basis, because most every month you will be hearing something about student data, and then along with operational updates as well. So I think it'll be a good agenda. So for March, we're going to do the College and Career Readiness Plan update at the listening tour at Travis on the 6th, along with the review that includes a number of key items like such as District of Innovation, calendar, and some policies and some major budget items.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. Do we have questions from the trustees on this?
Well, I guess I just wanted to know, some updates just can't be submitted to us via email or whatnot, and we just present as a, did you have any questions? Yeah, I think we did that once or twice.
We actually do quite a bit of that through the board update, but every now and then we'll get questions from trustees to put things on on a meeting, and so we try to honor that if that's important. So we can certainly all work closer with Mrs. Tassan to make sure that we're managing the meeting schedule and still honoring the board's request for those kinds of things as well.
So we kept that in mind. The things that are on the agenda are things that we believe need to be discussed in open meeting. So,
Right.
Mrs. James.
Well, I was just going to say, because we can't, unless it's on an open meeting agenda, we can't discuss it. It seems like, if we're, I agree last week was a little rough in terms of length. But if we limit the, well, I was, okay.
No, I'm not laughing at you, it's true.
Thank you.
A little understatement.
I know. But if we have the mindset that the time allotted for any particular topic is mostly about the trustees talking about it, then if we keep that in mind and have, introductory remarks, if you will, and we've done our homework, then we can have a good conversation and spend the time doing that in public. And it's still the report or whatever is still posted for the public to look at and read on their own. And I think we meet all those objectives that we want to do without spending hours and hours.
Any other questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move so we adjourn.
We are adjourned.